really, in writing the book, I thought, well, there's two stories here. In fact, it turned out to be three. One is the extraordinary achievements of Erebus in the Antarctic over a period of 4 years. The other is the complete catastrophe in the Arctic. And the third part of the story is the rediscovery of the ship. So they're still there with whatever might be on board. If I'd been on one of the ships, I'd have said, a 59-year-old man who's obviously a little bit overweight and he hasn't actually sailed to the Arctic or been in the Arctic for a good many years, perhaps would make me slightly concerned that this was the best person to take you through a very, very dangerous passage successfully. But the evidence from the officers who write about the start of the journey is that they liked Franklin. He was obviously a nice guy. He was very amiable. He gave parties. He had people around for sort of dinners in his cabin. He was very concerned with the well-being of the men on the expedition. So, I mean, he was popular with the people on the expedition, and so perhaps it wasn't so disastrous him being chosen at the age of 59. People have been very helpful. I mean, once people know you're writing about this subject, there are a lot of people who really want to tell the real story, want it to be told. Very often family, descendants of the people there. The Franklin family gave me some very useful material, access to letters. Because I'm so fascinated in the geography of it and the challenge of it now, makes me think that perhaps then, were I to be given that chance, I'd have said yes, but I probably would have had to join the Navy when I was quite young. This was what people did, you know. James Clark Ross, Franklin, both joined the Navy when they were 11 or 12, and that was their sort of college education. Their apprenticeship was in the Navy. I think, and when I was growing up, I always wanted to join the Navy. I thought this was the thing I wanted to do. So maybe I would have been lured into it. I don't think I'd have been frightened by the prospect. I think I'd been quite excited by it. Only when when you get there and in the Southern Ocean, I just think I don't know if I'd survived the battering the ships got there. The weather conditions were really bad. The 2 or 3 winters they were in the Arctic are the worst winters for decades, and the ice was obviously everywhere, and it didn't release them in the end during the summer either. So I think what could have happened is that they could have left more indications as to where they had been. And they didn't do that, really. There was one note, which is found, the Victory Point note, and that was found, a long time later, sort of 9 years after they'd left. If they'd left more, they could have left more indications as to where they'd gone, and I think that might have helped them be found. They could have left food drops, as had been recommended, but the Admiralty wasn't interested in that, so that they could have gone back and got supplies. But I think what happened is they turned south to avoid very heavy ice. They just couldn't go due west as they'd hoped. And as soon as they went south, they were in an area which was uncharted, and they were locked because the channels are narrow, the ice comes down, it becomes absolutely impacted, and they stayed there for 2 years. The 2 ships were like fortresses. Everything they needed was on board ship. This was the mentality of the expedition. And what happened, as soon as they left the ship, they were vulnerable. They didn't have dogs, didn't have light sledges, they didn't, not many of them spoke Inuktitut, so they couldn't really converse with the Inuit. So I think that would be the same problem if they'd left a year earlier. But they would have been fitter, and they perhaps could have got to the bases. The ships would not have been rediscovered if it had not been for the Canadian interest that was awakened. Certainly, in the 1980s, when they exhumed the bodies. From that period on, various other factors obviously encouraged the Canadians to spend a lot of money in looking for these 2 ships. An agreement came out with the British government. The British said, well, you can have the ships, provided if you find any bodies or gold, we'll have those back.